When we think about the Christmas story, we imagine warm and cozy scenes, Mary, Joseph, and the baby Jesus in a humble manger, accompanied by shepherds offering their praise. But right in the middle of this heartwarming tale is a grim event. In Matthew 2:16, Herod, after learning about the birth of the Messianic king, orders the killing of all boys aged 2 and under in Bethlehem. It's a disturbing part of Christ's birth story, but not everybody believes Matthew's account. Scholars and historians doubt this event for a few reasons. It's not in Luke's gospel or in any other historical records. Some think it was made up to fit a narrative, to portray Jesus as a new Israel through a new Exodus by placing him in Egypt. This connects to Exodus, where Pharaoh ordered the killing of Hebrew baby boys because he felt threatened by their growing numbers. These scholars say that Matthew might have created this story to draw parallels to Moses and Jesus. Furthermore, when scholars can't confirm what Matthew says with outside sources, they suggest that he made Old Testament prophecies into history. For instance, why did Matthew send Jesus to Egypt when Luke didn't mention it? Some think it was to make it seem like Jesus fulfilled the prophecy in Hosea 11:1. They also mention Jeremiah's prophecy about wailing over Rachel's children in Jeremiah 31:15. Some skeptics say that to Matthew, this means Herod might have done something, like killing Rachel's descendants, to fit the prophecy, even if it doesn't match the historical facts. So did Matthew lie, or was he telling the truth? Let's consider what we know about King Herod. He operated like a paranoid mob boss. Real or perceived threats to his authority got dealt with violently. Upon becoming king, his first order of business was to purge his Hasmonean predecessors. He had Mattathias Antonigus executed because he saw him as a threat. He had the elderly John Hyrcanus II strangled over an alleged plot to have him overthrown. He also had his brother-in-law, who was also the high priest, drowned in his swimming pool because he thought the Jews would want him to be ruler instead of him. Out of paranoia, he had his own mother-in-law executed, and then later his second wife, Mirame, killed as well. And then 3 of his sons through that marriage were also murdered to top things off. Herod became more unhinged in his later years. In the last few years of his life, he had 300 military leaders executed. Then a little bit later, some Pharisees prophesied that his kingdom would not fall to his heirs, so he rounded them up and had them killed too. With prophecies already circulating within his kingdom, is it any wonder Herod would want to kill the baby Jesus when the Magi revealed the new king of the Jews was born? Herod also imprisoned the leading figures of Palestine in the Hippodrome, intending to have them killed at the time of his death to ensure grand mourning. Evidently, he had no expectations of genuine mourning for his passing. This evil scheme might have gained more attention if his relatives hadn't relented after his death, allowing all those citizens to return home unharmed. For what it's worth, a historical and psychological analysis diagnosed Herod the Great with paranoid personality disorder. Suffice to say, the Massacre of the Innocents is totally on brand with what we know about King Herod the Great. So was Jesus Moses 2.0 according to Matthew? The comparison between Herod's massacre of the Bethlehem children and Pharaoh's act in Exodus 1:2 often comes up, but diving into these parallels reveals stark differences. Pharaoh, a foreign ruler, fretted over the Jewish population because he thought they were getting too big, resulting in a broad public decree even before Moses' birth. Yet in Matthew 2, we encounter an Israeli ruler bothered about just one individual based on a supernatural tip-off from the Magi. This ruler acts alone in a single city without any public announcement following Jesus' birth. These differences barely scratch the surface of the supposed Herod and Pharaoh comparison. Furthermore, unlike Moses, Jesus lacks older siblings playing a key role in his life. While Moses was raised in Pharaoh's household, Jesus grows up in an ordinary lower-class home. As you go through the first 2 chapters of Exodus, it's clear that Matthew could have drawn upon or mirrored aspects of Moses' life more closely if he wanted to, but he consciously chose not to. And even if parallels between Jesus and Moses were really strong, uncommon parallels might make us question historicity, but we need to consider other various factors. Sometimes 2 entities or events share uncanny similarities, yet are widely acknowledged as historical, like the well-known resemblances between Abraham Lincoln and John F. Kennedy. On other occasions, historical events might oddly resemble fictional accounts, like the similarities between the sinking of the Titanic and an earlier well-known fictional tale of the sinking of the Titan. However, these unusual parallels don't overshadow the substantial evidence supporting the historical authenticity of JFK and the Titanic. While they might prompt skepticism in other contexts, parallels by themselves aren't strong evidence against historical accuracy. So far, I've been countering the negative arguments, but there's solid evidence supporting the events of Matthew 2. Check out verses 19 through 22. That's when Jesus' family begins their journey back from Egypt right after Herod the Great passes away. It says, "But when Herod died, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, Rise, take the child and his mother, and go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead. And he rose and took the child and his mother and went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was reigning over Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there, and being warned in a dream, he withdrew to the district of Galilee. Now, put on your historian hat and consider these passages. They spark 3 intriguing questions. Number 1, why did Galilee act as some kind of safe haven for the Holy Family? 2, why wasn't Archelaus titled king, unlike his father Herod? And 3, and most crucially, why did Joseph get uneasy about hearing about Archelaus taking charge? To crack the puzzle, let's consult Josephus. In Antiquity 17:3-1, he notes that after Herod the Great passed away, his realm split among his sons. Archelaus ruled over Judea, but Galilee fell under the sway of his brother Herod Antipas. So apparently Joseph wanted to steer clear of Archelaus' territory for some reason, and we'll find out why in just a moment. So why didn't Archelaus go by the title of king? His army called him a king, but Archelaus refused to assume the title until he submitted his claims to Caesar Augustus. Even his own brother opposed him because of his reputation for being cruel. In 4 BC, Augustus gave him the greater part of Samaria, Judea, and Idumea, but only under the title of ethnarch. Archelaus continued to be a bully, and eventually the Jews complained loudly enough that he was violating the commands of Caesar. Augustus was infuriated with Archelaus and banished him to Vienna and stripped him of his title and wealth in 6 AD, about 10 years after he gained authority and in the 12th year after Jesus' birth. It's interesting to note that the first time Jesus is mentioned going along with his family to Passover in Jerusalem is when he was 12 years old after Archelaus was gone. In answering the third and most important question, when Joseph heard that Archelaus was reigning in his father's place, he knew that this was bad news. Archelaus first gained his bloody reputation from ordering the brutal slaughter of 3,000 Jews at Passover. So here's what happened. There were some Jews who were outraged to see Roman shields posted over the gate of the temple. They saw this as a clear sign of disrespect in breaking the Decalogue's commands against graven images. So these devout and zealous Jews took the liberty of cutting them down. These protesters were immediately executed on Herod's orders and not given a proper burial. Now, you might imagine that this didn't set well with the Jews. Thousands attended Passover annually, and the tale swiftly spread among the crowds of the very next Passover when Archelaus was in charge. A sizable group of protesting Jews confronted a small Roman soldier unit, and tensions escalated to the point where the Jews stoned some of the soldiers. The culprits fled into the temple carrying their sacrifices, perhaps hoping to vanish within the crowd. The new ruler Archelaus caught wind of it and opted for the classic "there's a new sheriff in town" approach. Josephus tells us that Archelaus, wanting to maintain control, sent his entire army. He used horsemen to stop people outside the temple from helping those inside and to chase down anyone trying to escape. About 3,000 men were killed, making others run to the nearby mountains. Archelaus then told everybody to pack their stuff and go home. Passover that year was canceled. As one of his first acts as ethnarch, this made him wildly unpopular. So imagine this scene. Mary, Joseph, and the little Jesus on their journey back from Egypt, encountering a sea of distressed pilgrims pouring out of Judea, sharing the harrowing news. Faced with this, they pivot and decide to head to Galilee instead, where Archelaus' younger brother Herod Antipas held sway. Seeking refuge from one ruthless tyrant in Judea, Joseph wisely concluded that re-entering the realm of yet another tyrant wasn't a prudent move. Notice that Matthew's account is indirectly precise, indicating a knowledgeable source. His accurate mention of Archelaus' status and the unspoken hint that Archelaus didn't rule Galilee align perfectly with Josephus' account. When compared to later Christian apocryphal legends about Jesus, which lack this level of precise detail, Matthew's narrative feels genuine and truthful. There's really not much reason to question this story, and it seems like Matthew was probably trying to tell it like it actually happened.